Hey guys, tonight we're following the sun god Apollo as he attempts to throw the greatest music festival in divine history. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive the secondhand embarrassment when his centaur security team discovers fermented nectar. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing this community span the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Apollo's gleaming kitchen on Mount Olympus, where the marble countertops reflect the pre dawn starlight, and the god of music, poetry, and really bad timing is attempting to make eggs. The yolk explodes like a tiny sun going supernova, splattering golden residue across his perfect cheekbones. By my own blazing chariot, he mutters, wiping divine egg from his laurel crown, which, fun fact, he's worn ever since that whole Daphne turning into a tree situation. The kitchen fills with smoke as Apollo's frustration literally raises the temperature. His lyre, propped against the counter, starts playing a mournful tune on its own, each string vibrating with its master's annoyance. This is when Zeus chooses to burst through the door, thunder crackling in his beard, holding what appears to be a scroll titled Mandatory Team Building Exercises for Dysfunctional Pantheons. Morning, sun, Zeus booms, completely ignoring the culinary disaster. Great news. I've signed us all up for trust falls with the Titans. You watch Apollo's left eye twitch, a movement that causes three roosters somewhere in Corinth to crow at the wrong time. Historians still argue whether this specific incident led to the invention of the snooze button in ancient Greece, though that seems unlikely given they used water clocks. Trust falls, Apollo repeats flatly, with the beings we imprisoned in Tartarus. Zeus waves dismissively, accidentally creating a small lightning storm in the breakfast nook. Details, details. Prometheus already RSVP'd. He's bringing liver pate, bit dark, that joke, but he insisted. As Zeus rambles about icebreakers and name tags, you notice Apollo's fingers drumming against the counter in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like a funeral march. His eyes glaze over with the thousand-yard stare of someone planning either murder or, worse, event planning. You know what? Apollo interrupts, his voice carrying that dangerous calm gods get right before they turn someone into a constellation. I'll organize something better, a music festival, the greatest gathering of musical talent ever assembled. That Zeus strokes his beard, which is never a good sign. A festival, like that thing Dionysus did last century, where everyone woke up married to goats? No, Apollo says firmly, already mentally drafting the lineup. A proper festival with stages and schedules and absolutely no goats in wedding veils. The egg on the stove finally gives up and transforms into a small phoenix, which flies out the window squawking complaints about working conditions. Neither god notices. Fine, Zeus agrees, mainly because he's spotted Hera coming down the hallway and needs an exit strategy. But if this goes badly, you're leading the trust falls. As the king of gods vanishes in a convenient thunderclap. You watch Apollo stand alone in his ruined kitchen, smoke curling around his golden form. He picks up his lyre and strums a chord that makes every dog in Greece simultaneously howl. The mainstream historical record shows this as the moment musical festivals were born, though a lesser known account from a minor sea nymph claims Apollo was actually trying to invent the smoke alarm. A festival, he muses, his eyes beginning to glow with divine inspiration and what might be the early stages of a complete nervous breakdown. I'll show them all. It'll be perfect, organized, punctual, nothing at all like Dionysus's goat wedding fiasco. Somewhere in the distance, the fates exchange knowing looks and begin weaving some very complicated knots. The muses arrive like a divine intervention staged by your most judgmental relatives, bursting through Apollo's palace doors in a synchronized swirl of flowing robes and barely contained exasperation. You're still standing in the kitchen, watching Apollo sketch festival layouts on a piece of papyrus that keeps catching fire every time he gets too excited about the acoustic dynamics of natural amphitheaters. Brother, Calliope announces, her voice carrying the weight of someone who's had to bail Apollo out of every creative crisis since the invention of the alphabet. We need to talk about your hobby. Apollo doesn't look up from his smoking plans. It's not a hobby, it's a revolutionary cultural movement that will reshape how mortals experience. You made a 47-hour ballad about your favorite sandal, Terpsichore interrupts, demonstrating her point with an interpretive dance that somehow perfectly captures the essence of footwear-related tedium. You notice Melpomene in the corner, the muse of tragedy, already taking notes for what she's calling the inevitable downfall of Apollo's hubris, a musical. She's been right about these things before. Historians still argue whether she predicted the Trojan War or just gave Homer really good story notes. That was a concept album, Apollo protests, his golden aura flickering with indignation. The sandal was a metaphor for the journey of the soul through. It had 16 verses about leather conditioning. All 9 muses shout in unison, a harmonic convergence that shatters 3 decorative vases and startles a minor wind deity who was napping in the curtains. Clio, ever the historian, produces a scroll that unfurls across the entire kitchen floor. Shall we review your previous musical endeavors? The Orpheus incident, where you taught him to play so well, he literally charmed his way into the underworld and annoyed Hades into changing his security protocols? That was a success. Apollo beams. He looked back. Euterpe reminds him gently. His wife turned back into a shade. He spent the rest of his life so depressed, he invented the blues 3,000 years early. You watch Apollo's face cycle through the 5 stages of grief, getting stuck somewhere between denial and composing a rebuttal in iambic pentameter, Thalia, the muse of comedy. Can't help but snicker at his expression, a sound like wind chimes that's having an existential crisis. Look, Apollo says, spreading his hands in what he probably thinks is a calming gesture, but actually causes a minor solar flare somewhere over Egypt. This festival will be different, professional, organized. I've already got Hermes working on marketing, the same Hermes who convinced Atlas that holding up the sky was a timeshare opportunity? Polyhymnia asks, her sacred geometry patterned robes shifting to display what appears to be a flowchart of every bad decision Apollo has ever made. Calliope steps forward, and in a moment of frustration that will later be credited with creating an entirely new art form, she begins to speak in a rapid, rhythmic pattern. Oh, you think you're so bright, Mr. God of Light, planning your fest like you know what's best. But let me confess, your musical mess has got us all stressed. She stops abruptly, looking startled. The other muses stare at her in shock. What? What was that? Urania whispers, her astronomical instruments spinning wildly as if trying to calculate this new form of expression. I don't know, Calliope admits, looking at her hands like they've betrayed her. It just came out, all rhythmic and aggressive and brilliant, Apollo exclaims, completely missing the point as usual. We'll feature it at the festival. Competitive poetry with attitude. We'll call it slam poetry. You see the exact moment when the muses realize they've made everything worse. It's a fringe historical theory that Calliope's accidental invention of slam poetry was actually an attempt by the universe to balance out Apollo's relentless optimism with something grittier, though contemporary scholars mostly argue about whether this counts as the first rap battle. Fine, Melpomene sighs dramatically because she can't help herself. We'll help with your festival, but we're implementing safety protocols. No more incidents where your music that literally moves mountains. That happened one time, Apollo protests. 6 times, Cleo corrects, consulting her records. 7 if you count that situation with the volcano in Crete, though technically that was more of a rhythmic eruption than details. Apollo waves dismissively, his gesture accidentally composing a small sonnet in the air that floats away looking embarrassed. So you'll help? The muses exchange glances that contain entire conversations about familial obligation, divine dysfunction, and whether it's possible to disown an immortal sibling. Finally, they nod in unison, a movement so synchronized it creates a small pocket of perfect harmony that will later inspire Pythagoras to develop his music theory. But we're doing this our way, Calliope insists, already mentally preparing what historians will later call the first crisis management plan. With schedules and backup plans, and absolutely no improvisation involving celestial bodies. Apollo grins, the kind of smile that makes mortals write epic poems and also take out insurance policies. Of course, what could possibly go wrong? In the corner, Cleo quietly adds another entry to her scroll. Famous last words, volume MCMX2. You're bouncing along in Apollo's solar chariot, which he's temporarily reconfigured as what he calls a mobile venue scouting platform, but looks suspiciously like a golden tour bus with flame decals. The sun horses keep neighing complaints about union violations, while Apollo consults a map that definitely wasn't drawn to scale, considering it shows Olympus as roughly the same size as the entire Mediterranean. First stop, Apollo announces, pulling the reins with the confidence of someone who's never had to parallel park a celestial vehicle. Delphi, home of my oracle, perfect acoustics, and that lovely little gift shop that sells miniature prophecies. The chariot descends through clouds that smell faintly of ambrosia and burnt offerings, landing with a thud that registers on several primitive seismographs the Babylonians won't invent for another 1,000 years. You stumble out onto the sacred grounds where the Pythia, Apollo's chief oracle, is mid prophecy, surrounded by vapors that historians still argue whether were volcanic gases, burning laurel leaves, or just really intense incense from that shop down the mountain. O great seeker, she intones, then spots Apollo and immediately drops the mystic act. Oh, it's you. I'm in the middle of telling this king he's going to accidentally marry his mother. Can this wait? Just scouting for my festival, Apollo says, already measuring distances with his hands and muttering about sight lines. How's the vibe here? Good for music? The Pythia gestures at the assembled petitioners, all looking various shades of traumatized by their prophecies. You want to throw a party where I just told someone they'll be murdered by shellfish? You notice one man in the corner clutching a scroll and eyeing every nearby seafood vendor with deep suspicion. The mainstream historical record suggests the oracle at Delphi maintained its reputation through carefully worded ambiguities, though a lesser known account from a temple janitor claims she just had really good intel from traveling merchants. Bad vibes, Apollo concedes, making a note on his planning scroll. Next stop. The journey continues across Greece like a divine road trip planned by someone who learned geography from a poet. At Mount Parnassus, Apollo immediately vetoes the location after discovering the local nymphs have formed a union demanding hazard pay for proximity to divine nonsense. In Athens, Athena threatens him with a cease and desist order before he even lands the chariot, holding up a scroll of city ordinances about noise levels that she definitely just invented on the spot. What about here, you suggest, as the chariot hovers over what appears to be an active volcano? Apollo's eyes light up with the kind of enthusiasm that makes insurance companies weep. Brilliant. Natural pyrotechnics, built in special effects. The acoustics of a volcanic crater are. He pauses, watching a small eruption send lava fountaining into the air. Actually, let me check the liability situation with Hephaestus first. 3 hours later, you're standing on a pristine beach near Corinth, watching Apollo pace back and forth, leaving little golden footprints in the sand that local crabs immediately investigate, thinking there's some kind of fancy food. The location is perfect. Natural amphitheater formed by the cliffs, easy access by both land and sea, and far enough from any major temples that noise complaints would take weeks to process through the divine bureaucracy. This is it, Apollo declares, spreading his arms wide in a gesture that causes a small rainbow to appear, which he pretends was intentional. The perfect spot for Apollo Fest. You're not calling it that. A voice groans from behind a sand dune. Artemis emerges, bow in hand, looking like she's been hunting, but mainly finding reasons to avoid family gatherings. Also, this is my favorite hunting ground. The deer here are particularly stupid. It's very relaxing. Sister, Apollo beams, choosing to ignore both her criticism and the implied threat. You can have a VIP tent. I don't wanna. Artemis stops, noticing something. Is that a volcano in your backup location list? Apollo clutches his scroll protectively. It's atmospheric. You watch the twin deities argue, their divine bickering creating small weather patterns. Apollo's irritation manifests as uncomfortably warm breezes, while Artemis's annoyance brings unseasonably cool shade. A group of local fishermen in the distance are taking bets on which god will storm off first, using a complex odds system that won't be formally invented for centuries. Fine, Artemis finally says, but I get exclusive hunting rights during setup week, and if any of your music scares away the wildlife, I'm turning your lyre into a bow. Apollo agrees quickly, mostly because he's already mentally designing the stage layout. You notice him sketching in the sand with his toe, creating elaborate diagrams that immediately get washed away by waves seemingly sent by Poseidon, who's apparently been eavesdropping and has opinions about beach usage rights. As the day wears on, Apollo marks the territory with divine energy, creating boundary lines that glow faintly gold and will later confuse archaeologists who'll spend decades arguing about their ritual significance. The fringe theory that these were actually just ancient parking zones for Pegasi remains hotly debated in certain academic circles. Perfect, Apollo mutters, surveying his chosen domain as the sun, which he's forgotten he's supposed to be driving, starts setting itself on autopilot. Now I just need to handle logistics, permits, talent booking, security, concessions, merchandising. His voice trails off as the list grows longer, but his enthusiasm doesn't dim. If anything, it burns brighter, like a star about to go supernova, which is rarely a comforting comparison when gods are involved. The divine planning committee you've been forced to witness has been going surprisingly well for exactly 47 minutes, which in Olympian terms is basically a miracle worthy of its own feast day. You're seated at a marble table that Apollo conjured on the beach, watching him explain crowd flow patterns using seashells as audience members and pieces of seaweed as stage barriers. When the air suddenly reeks of fermented grapes and poor decisions. Did someone say festival? Dionysus materializes in a purple haze, already 3 sheets to the wind at what you're pretty sure is 10 in the morning. He's wearing a toga made entirely of wine stains and what appears to be a crown of grapes that are somehow simultaneously fresh and fermented. Because I invented festivals. Ask anyone. Well, don't ask Athena. She's still mad about that thing with the philosophers. Apollo's eye twitches in a way that causes a minor solar eclipse somewhere over Gaul. This is a music festival, brother. Organized, scheduled, absolutely no spontaneous orgies. No spontaneous. Dionysus looks personally offended, clutching his thyrsus like a security blanket. Then what's even the point? Next, you'll tell me there's no ritual madness. Correct, Apollo says firmly, reorganizing his seashells with the determination of someone who thinks order can defeat chaos if you just alphabetize hard enough. You watch Dionysus process this information, his face cycling through emotions like a drunk person trying to solve advanced mathematics. Historians still argue whether his expression at this moment invented the concept of existential dread or just perfected it. Okay, Dionysus finally says, plopping down at the table and immediately knocking over Apollo's carefully arranged model. But you need VIP areas for the important mortals and the semi important mortals. And that guy who makes really good cheese in Athens, love that guy. We're not having a class system at my egalitarian celebration of music, Apollo insists, even as he unconsciously arranges the scattered seashells into a perfect golden ratio. Oh, please, Dionysus snorts, producing a wineskin from somewhere physically impossible. You literally have a chariot made of sun. Your entire existence is a VIP area. Before Apollo can respond with what would undoubtedly be a devastatingly witty retort set to iambic pentameter, Dionysus stands up abruptly, swaying slightly. You know what this festival needs? Energy, excitement, controlled chaos. No chaos, Apollo says quickly. Absolutely no. But Dionysus is already demonstrating, grabbing a nearby satyr who was just trying to deliver Apollo's mail and spinning him around. Picture this, an area where mortals can really let loose, push against each other in rhythmic unity, feel the music in their bones. That sounds dangerous, Apollo observes, watching the dizzy satyr stumble into the ocean. I call it. Dionysus pauses for dramatic effect, which is undermined by his hiccup. A mosh pit. A what now? Mosh, like the sound bodies make when they collide enthusiastically. Dionysus is now demonstrating on invisible partners, his movements creating small whirlwinds of sand and confused crabs. It's primal, it's passionate, it's a liability nightmare, Apollo completes, but you can see him making notes on his scroll anyway. The fringe historical theory that moshing was actually invented by Dionysus 3 millennia early is generally dismissed by scholars, though they can't explain those ancient Greek vases depicting what looks suspiciously like crowd surfing. And, Dionysus continues, now fully in his element, which is somewhere between inspirational and concerning. We need a special tent for very, very important immortals with cushions and those little grapes that peel themselves. We're not segregating the gods from the mortals, Apollo says, though his resolve is clearly weakening. This is about unity through music. Unity through music is what I call it when everyone's too drunk to remember who they came with. Dionysus counters, wisdom emerging from the wine fog. Look, sunshine boy, you want this festival to work? You need a little chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. You watch Apollo struggle with this concept, his orderly nature warring with the uncomfortable realization that Dionysus might have a point. Somewhere in the distance, the fates are probably laughing. Fine, Apollo finally concedes. One VIP area, for gods only, no mortals, unless they're performing or have achieved something truly extraordinary, like inventing democracy or discovering fire. Prometheus is still using that last one on his business cards, Dionysus notes, already sketching elaborate tent designs in the sand with his thyrsus. Oh, and we need a green room for the performers, somewhere they can prepare, tune their instruments, sacrifice to their preferred deities. Actually, Apollo admits reluctantly, that's not terrible. I have my moments. Dionysus grins, then immediately proves otherwise by suggesting, What about a wine fountain shaped like my head that cries fermented tears? Absolutely not. Zeus's beard made of beer streams? No. Hera's. Nothing shaped like any family member's body parts. Apollo cuts him off, adding another line to what's becoming an extensive list of prohibitions. The planning continues as the sun reaches its zenith, with Dionysus alternating between genuinely helpful suggestions, multiple stages so acts don't overlap, and absolutely unhinged ones. A petting zoo, but it's just mine odds. You notice Apollo's scroll growing longer and more complex, covered in increasingly frantic notes about crowd control and divine insurance policies. One more thing, Dionysus says, as he prepares to leave, his departure already manifesting as the smell of wine and impending chaos. You're gonna need security, mortal security. Gods don't listen to rules, and mortals run when we tell them to stop. I was thinking centaurs, Apollo muses. Dionysus laughs, a sound like wine barrels exploding in harmony. Centaurs, at a festival with alcohol, what could possibly go wrong? He vanishes in a puff of purple smoke that forms suspiciously inappropriate shapes before dissipating, leaving Apollo alone with his plans and the growing realization that he might be in over his gloriously golden head. Hermes arrives at Apollo's temporary headquarters, a hastily constructed golden tent that keeps trying to harmonize with the wind, carrying what can only be described as a marketing disaster waiting to happen. You're watching Apollo tune his lyre for the thousandth time when the messenger god bursts through the tent flaps, winged sandals still smoking from whatever dimension he just violated to get here faster. Behold, Hermes announces, producing a stack of clay tablets that immediately crack under their own weight. The future of festival promotion, I call them flyers. Apollo catches one of the falling pieces, squinting at the hieroglyphics carved into the surface. Why does this symbol of a lyre look like a duck being attacked by a constellation? Artistic interpretation, Hermes says defensively. The mortals in Memphis assured me it was very avant garde. Plus, I got a bulk discount for ordering 40,000. And you examine one of the intact tablets, trying to decipher what appears to be either an invitation to a music festival or a declaration of agricultural warfare, depending on how you tilt your head. The mainstream historical record shows this as the period when written communication began standardizing across the Mediterranean, though scholars conveniently ignore the part where several city-states briefly went to war over what they thought were territorial threats, but were actually just poorly translated concert announcements. Hermes, Apollo says slowly, the kind of slow that suggests he's calculating exactly how much trouble fratricide would cause at the next family dinner. This symbol here, what does it mean? Oh, that's you. Hermes beams. Sun god, music, poetry, the works, very efficient symbolism. It looks like a chicken with a flaming disease. Well, when you put it negatively, and this part, Apollo points to another section, his finger glowing with barely suppressed divine irritation. The part that seems to suggest attendees should bring their own sacrificial goats. Hermes squints at his own creation. I thought that meant bring your own beverages. The dialect in Thebes is very contextual. A smaller tablet falls from the pile, and you pick it up to discover it's even worse than the others. This one appears to be Hermes's attempt at targeting the Persian market, but the translation is so mangled it essentially reads as Apollo declares your mother makes inadequate flatbread, followed by what might be either event details or instructions for siege warfare. We need to recall these immediately, Apollo declares, already composing what sounds like an apology song in ancient Sumerian. Before someone interprets this as too late, a breathless minor deity of gossip bursts in, feathers ruffled with excitement. As Sparta just mobilized their army, they think you're challenging them to a musical duel where the loser forfeits their city. Apollo's face goes through several interesting color changes, settling on a shade of gold that suggests barely controlled panic. How many did you distribute? Oh, just a few thousand, Hermes says casually, then adds, per city, I wanted to ensure market saturation. You watch Apollo silently count to 10 in what sounds like 17 different languages, including some that won't be invented yet. Meanwhile, Hermes pulls out another innovation, papyrus scrolls with what he calls concert posters, but look more like abstract threats against geometry. Look, I also made these. He unfurls one proudly. See, it's you riding your sun chariot, but I made it more dynamic by adding these swoosh lines. Those swoosh lines form the ancient symbol for plague incoming, Apollo interrupts, his voice achieving frequencies that make nearby dolphins concerned. You've essentially told everyone I'm bringing musical pestilence. Is that not metal enough? Hermes asks genuinely. Dionysus said we needed to be more metal. I'm still not sure what that means, but apparently it involves skulls and angst. Before Apollo can respond, another messenger arrives, this one from Athens, reporting that the city council is meeting to discuss whether Apollo's declaration of sonic warfare violates their recent peace treaties. Apparently, Hermes's flyers reached them during a particularly tense Senate session, and someone translated bring your own lyre as bring your own fire. I can fix this, Hermes insists, already pulling out new materials. I'll make clearer ones with pictures, universal symbols. No, Apollo says firmly, confiscating all writing materials within a 50-foot radius. No more flyers, no more tablets, definitely no more hieroglyphics. Then how will mortals know about the festival? Hermes protests, genuinely confused by the concept of communication that doesn't involve potential international incidents. Apollo thinks for a moment, then smiles, the kind of smile that makes smart mortals suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere. Word of mouth, divine word of mouth. You're going to personally visit every major city and verbally explain, in their local dialect, with no creative interpretation, that this is a peaceful music festival that could take weeks. Hermes whines, do you know how many dialects there are in Greece alone? And don't get me started on the Phoenicians. They conjugate verbs based on the phases of the moon. Then you'd better get started, Apollo says sweetly. And Hermes? If I hear of one more city-state mobilizing because of your marketing, I'm telling Zeus about that thing with his thunderbolts and the Cretan merchants. Hermes pales, which is impressive for someone already resembling a marble statue. You wouldn't. Try me, as Hermes races off, presumably to prevent several wars. You help Apollo gather the remaining tablets. Each one you examine is worse than the last. One appears to promise attendees they'll achieve an immortality through dance, while another might be inviting people to either a concert or a mass circumcision, depending on regional vowel usage. Musicians are complicated enough, Apollo mutters, building a small pyre for the offensive tablets. But musicians with armies, that's a whole different symphony of problems. And the fringe historical theory that several minor Mediterranean conflicts in this period were actually music festival misunderstandings is generally dismissed by serious historians, who prefer to believe an ancient peoples went to war over sensible things like Helen of Troy or disputed fishing rights, rather than badly translated concert flyers featuring inflammatory poultry symbolism. Athena arrives at the construction site wearing a helmet that's somehow also a blueprint, carrying enough scrolls to rebuild civilization from scratch, and radiating the kind of energy that makes you understand why she's the goddess of both wisdom and warfare. You're standing in what will eventually be the main stage area, watching mortal workers argue about foundation placement, while Apollo tries to explain his vision using interpretive lyre playing. Brother, Athena announces, materializing directly in the middle of the construction chaos. I heard you needed competent assistance, so naturally, I came immediately. I'm competent, Apollo protests, just as the wooden frame he's been leaning against collapses, taking two workers and a confused pelican with it. Athena doesn't even dignify this with a response. Instead, she unfurls a scroll that extends approximately to Crete, covered in architectural diagrams that seem to exist in at least 4 dimensions. I've taken the liberty of redesigning your entire stage concept. Your original plan had the structural integrity of Zeus's marriage vows. You watch Apollo's face cycle through indignation, curiosity, and reluctant acceptance as Athena begins explaining her improvements. The design includes something she calls acoustic optimization panels that look suspiciously like shields arranged in a pattern that could either enhance sound or summon Nike, goddess of victory, depending on the wind direction. And here, Athena points to a particularly complex section of the blueprint. We'll install a rotating platform system. It'll allow for seamless act transitions while maintaining continuous entertainment for the mortals. Rotating? Apollo perks up. Like the celestial spheres? Similar concept, better execution, Athena confirms, then adds ominously, with safety rails, I've seen your chariot driving. The construction begins immediately under Athena's supervision, and you quickly realize why she's both revered and feared. She corrects measurements with a glance, restructures load bearing beams with a gesture, and occasionally threatens underperforming workers with transformation into architectural elements. The mainstream historical record credits the Greeks with revolutionary acoustic design in their theaters, though it politely omits the fact that some amphitheaters were literally designed by a goddess having what she called a casual afternoon. By midday, the stage frame is taking shape, a massive wooden structure that somehow looks both imposing and elegant, like it could host either a concert or repel a siege. Athena has incorporated elements that won't be invented by mortals for centuries, including what she calls crowd surge barriers, but look suspiciously like miniature phalanx formations. Now, Athena announces, consulting another scroll, for my masterpiece, the stage effects system. Apollo looks concerned. Effects? Like theatrical effects? Oh, far beyond mere theater. Athena smiles, the kind of smile that makes generals nervous. Behold, she claps her hands, and the stage suddenly transforms. Panels slide, revealing hidden platforms. Trapdoors open and close in rhythm. What appeared to be simple wooden beams rearrange themselves into different configurations, creating levels and spaces that defy conventional physics. It's incredible, Apollo admits reluctantly, then frowns. Wait, why is it humming? Ah, Athena says, looking slightly embarrassed, a rare sight that several minor muses immediately commit to memory. That's a minor side effect. The complexity of the engineering has resulted in a form of consciousness. You blink. The stage has become self aware, because of course it has. Hello? The stage creaks in what can only be described as an enthusiastic baritone made of wood and ambition. I am stage. I am very excited to host performances. Would you like to hear my opinions on acoustic theory? Apollo stares at his sister. You gave my stage opinions. It's a very intelligent design, Athena defends. Intelligence was a natural byproduct. Look, it even has aesthetic preferences. That lyre solo was derivative, stage announces helpfully as a passing bard practices nearby. The bridge section lacks emotional complexity. Perhaps consider a key change in the third movement. The bard looks deeply offended and slightly terrified, a combination that will later inspire a whole new genre of performance anxiety. Historians still argue whether Greek theater's notorious critical culture began with harsh audiences or a literally judgmental stage, though most prefer the former explanation for their sanity. Can we turn off its ability to critique? Apollo asks hopefully. We could, Athena muses, but then we'd lose the automatic acoustic adjustments. It modifies itself in real time based on each performance's needs. As if to demonstrate, stage reshapes its back wall slightly. There, now the natural reverb will complement wind instruments more effectively. Also, that carpenter in the corner is off key when he whistles. The accused carpenter drops his hammer and backs away slowly, making a mental note to sacrifice something significant to Athena later. Fine, Apollo sighs. A sentient, critical stage. Why not? At this point, I'm just hoping it doesn't develop stage fright. Oh, that's impossible, Athena assures him. I designed it with supreme confidence in its abilities. I am the best stage, Stage proclaims proudly. No performance is beyond my capabilities. From solo lyre to full orchestral arrangements, I shall enhance them all. Though I do have thoughts about your festival lineup, no thoughts about the lineup, Apollo interrupts quickly. Just be a good stage and hold performers without commentary, but constructive criticism helps artists grow. Stage protests, sounding genuinely hurt. For instance, Your morning warm up scales tend to rush the transition between Lydian and Mixolydian modes. Apollo looks at Athena with an expression that suggests several new curse words are being invented in real time. She shrugs, gathering her scrolls with the satisfied air of someone who solved problems by creating entirely new ones. The design is perfect, she declares. Structurally sound, acoustically superior, and only slightly opinionated. You're welcome. As she vanishes in a shower of olive leaves and mathematical equations, you're left with Apollo, who's staring at his new stage with the expression of someone realizing they've adopted a very large, very vocal pet that judges their life choices. At least it's sturdy, you offer. I am very sturdy. Stage agrees enthusiastically. Would you like to hear my thoughts on your posture? It could affect your performance quality. Apollo closes his eyes and counts to infinity in Greek. It's going to be a long festival. The morning of Poseidon's arrival starts with every well in a 5 mile radius spontaneously developing opinions about water quality, which should have been your first warning. You're helping Apollo arrange the VIP seating area because Dionysus won that argument through sheer persistence and strategic wine placement when the smell of brine and barely controlled tsunamis fills the air. Nephew, Poseidon's voice crashes across the beach like a tidal wave with a personal grudge. I hear you're throwing a party on my coastline without consulting the Lord of the Seas. Apollo forces a smile that could power a small sundial. Uncle, I sent you an invitation via dolphin messenger. That dolphin got distracted by a school of philosophy fish. Poseidon grumbles, materializing in a waterspout that deposits him 3 confused tuna and approximately half the Aegean Sea onto the beach. But I'm here now, and I have ideas. You watch Apollo's eye twitch as Poseidon immediately begins redesigning the venue with all the subtlety of a maritime earthquake. The sea god's trident waves enthusiastically, and suddenly geysers erupt at what he claims are acoustically optimal locations, but seem suspiciously close to the wine storage. What this festival needs, Poseidon declares, his beard dripping with what might be either seawater or the tears of coastal villages, is atmosphere, ambiance, the soothing sounds of the sea. We have the natural ocean sounds, Apollo points out, gesturing to the waves literally 20 feet away. Natural? Poseidon scoffs. Natural is for mortals who can't command the tides. Observe. With a dramatic flourish that causes several merchant ships to reconsider their career choices, Poseidon begins what he calls aquatic enhancement, and water rises from the sand in graceful arcs, forming fountains that spell out Apollofest in cursive until they realize that's not the official name and sulkily rearrange themselves into abstract splashes. Now for the pièce de résistance, Poseidon announces, and you immediately grab onto the nearest stable object, which happens to be stage. Oh, seismic activity detected, Stage comments helpfully. Should I adjust my foundation for potential liquefaction? Before anyone can answer, Poseidon strikes his trident 3 times against the ground. The beach shudders, splits, and suddenly there's a massive pool in the middle of the venue, complete with classical columns rising from the water and what appears to be stadium seating made entirely of compressed sand and broken promises. A water feature, Poseidon beams, for aquatic performances. We're not having aquatic performances, Apollo says weakly, but Poseidon is already whistling, a sound like whales having an argument about krill distribution. Within moments, a pod of dolphins appears, already choreographing what looks disturbingly like synchronized swimming routines. These are my best boys, Poseidon introduces them proudly. They've been practicing Orpheus's greatest hits. Well, their interpretation of them. Dolphins don't really understand minor keys. You watch in fascinated horror as the dolphins begin performing what might generously be called an aquatic ballet, but more accurately resembles marine life, having collective seizures to rhythm. The mainstream historical record describes this period as when Mediterranean dolphins showed unusual behavioral patterns, though historians attribute it to changes in fish migration rather than divine choreography lessons. Uncle, Apollo tries diplomatically, while I appreciate the enthusiasm, we need to consider the logistics. The audience can't see underwater performances from their seats. Already thought of that, Poseidon grins, and with another trident wave, the water in the pool becomes crystal clear and somehow magnifying, creating a liquid jumbotron effect that won't be technologically replicated for several millennia. Plus, watch this. The water suddenly erupts in patterns timed to Apollo's heartbeat, which would be impressive if Apollo's divine cardio wasn't essentially a hummingbird playing speed metal. Fountains shoot up and down so rapidly that several seagulls file formal complaints with the Aerial Navigation Guild. Can you make it calmer? Apollo requests, trying not to look at the seasick expressions on his mortal construction crew. Calmer? Calmer! Poseidon looks personally offended. The sea is not calm. The sea is passionate, dramatic, full of mystery and fish that shouldn't exist. Because as if to prove his point, something with too many tentacles and not enough respect for physics briefly surfaces in the pool, looks around with eyes that suggest advanced degrees in non Euclidean geometry, then dives back down, muttering about property values. Was that? Apollo starts. Kevin, Poseidon explains. He's been living in a trench near Crete. Nice fellow, bit shy, writes poetry about the meaninglessness of surface tension. The construction continues with Poseidon adding increasingly elaborate water features. There's now a moat around the VIP area for exclusivity, fountains that sing badly, and a mist machine that creates rainbows but also makes everyone's hair impossibly frizzy. Athena's perfectly designed stage is now surrounded by what looks like an aquatic theme park designed by someone who's never seen a theme or a park. And for the grand finale, Poseidon shouts, ignoring Apollo's visible panic. He raises his trident one more time, and suddenly it begins to rain, but only over the venue, and only in rhythmic patterns that spell out messages like Poseidon rules and Zeus owes me drachmas. Indoor rain, Poseidon says proudly, for atmosphere. We're outdoors, Apollo points out. Details. Poseidon waves dismissively, accidentally creating a small tsunami in the performance pool that sends his dolphins into an impromptu aerial routine. The mortals will love it. Nothing says great concert like being mysteriously damp. As the day wears on, the venue transforms into a bizarre hybrid of concert space and oceanic disaster. The fringe historical theory that Atlantis was actually just Poseidon's failed venue design is generally dismissed, though the similarities are admittedly striking. You help Apollo try to contain the water features to designated areas, but Poseidon's enthusiasm is literally flowing over. At least it's unique, you offer, watching a fountain spontaneously develop what appears to be performance anxiety and refuse to spray on cue. I am adjusting my wood treatment to resist salt damage, stage announces. Also, the dolphin's pitch is flat. Perhaps they need to tune their sonar? Apollo looks at his underwater amphitheater, his sentient stage, and his uncle teaching an octopus to play maracas, and you can see him mentally adding, hire a divine insurance broker to his ever growing list. The mortal ticket situation begins at dawn with exactly three people: a goat herder who got lost, an insomniac philosopher arguing that lines are a social construct, and someone's grandmother who brought snacks for everyone. You're watching Apollo set up what he calls a fair and orderly ticketing system when the news of the festival hits the general population like a divine revelation wrapped in a party invitation. Within an hour, the line stretches from the venue to Athens. By noon, it's reached Sparta, where confused warriors are trying to decide if queuing counts as combat training. The philosopher is now at position number 4000 and still maintaining that his original spot exists in a metaphysical sense that transcends physical placement. This is good, Apollo beams, surveying the crowd from his floating sun platform. Look at all these music lovers, and it's so organized. You don't have the heart to tell him that what he's seeing as organized is actually several distinct line feuds, two breakaway Q republics, and at least one group that's formed a line based religious cult worshiping the concept of next. Lord Apollo, a harried mortal clerk, rushes up, clay tablets clutched desperately. We need to discuss pricing. The people want to know how much. Oh, I've invented a new system, Apollo interrupts, pulling out a scroll covered in calculations that would make Pythagoras weep. I call it dynamic pricing. The cost adjusts based on demand, time of day, proximity to the stage, and the buyer's enthusiasm level. The clerk stares. How do we measure enthusiasm? Excellent question. Apollo produces what appears to be a golden mood ring the size of a dinner plate. This device reads their excitement and adjusts the price accordingly. Peak excitement means peak prices. It's perfectly logical. You watch the clerk try to process this while behind him, the line continues to grow with the inexorable force of human FOMO. Someone has started selling positions in line, creating a secondary market that immediately develops its own complex economics. A fringe historical theory suggests this was actually the birth of modern capitalism, though most economists prefer to blame the Phoenicians. 50 drachmas for general admission, a merchant shouts, reading the base price. That's highway robbery. Maritime robbery, actually, Poseidon corrects, still fiddling with his fountains. Highway robbery is Hermes's department. The pricing system immediately causes chaos. The enthusiasm detector starts giving wildly different readings, rating a dead eyed bureaucrat as maximum hype, while insisting a literally jumping up and down teenager has mild interest. Apollo keeps adjusting the device, which only makes things worse. Why is it charging me 100 drachmas? One woman demands. I'm not even that excited. I just have a thyroid condition. The device has spoken, the clerk says helplessly, then quietly adds, we also accept goats, olive oil, or firstborn children. Wait, no, that's the wrong tablet. Meanwhile, the line situation evolves into something anthropologists would later study if they could believe it actually happened. Different sections develop distinct cultures. The front has become an aristocracy of early arrivals. The middle has established a bartering economy based on sheep futures, and the back has devolved into philosophical debates about whether the line actually ends or simply transforms into a circle. We need to implement a reservation system, Apollo decides, manifesting several thousand numbered clay tokens. Everyone gets a number, and we call them in order. But Lord Apollo, the clerk whimpers, we've already given out different numbers using 3 different systems, and one group is using a complex algorithm based on star positions. The resulting confusion as people try to figure out which numbering system is official creates what historians would later call the Great Q War of the Bronze Age, though they'd blame it on territorial disputes because the truth is too embarrassing. You watch 3 different number based factions form, complete with battle standards and marching songs. I'm number 47, one man screams. Which 47? Another shouts back. Solar 47, lunar 47, or sequential 47. There's also philosophical 47, the insomniac philosopher adds helpfully, which exists in a state of numerical superposition. Apollo tries to restore order by creating a unified ticketing system, but his mathematical calculations become so complex that the tokens themselves achieve sentience and start arguing about their proper sequence. One particularly aggressive number, 8 and 88, insists it should be first because 8 is simply infinity standing up, and I'm triple infinity. The economic situation deteriorates when Apollo's dynamic pricing algorithm decides that anyone wearing purple must be wealthy and charges them accordingly. This leads to a massive impromptu clothes swap that looks like a textile riot, with people frantically trading garments to achieve the cheapest possible color combination. The green tunics are getting in for half price, someone discovers, causing a run on every green dye merchant within 50 miles. The Mediterranean green dye shortage of this era is well documented, though historians attribute it to military needs rather than concert economics. By sunset, the line has developed its own governance system, complete with elected officials, a crude justice system for line cutters, and what appears to be the world's first cue based national anthem. The grandmother from the morning has set up a small food empire and is somehow now the wealthiest person in the line. Maybe we should just let everyone in, you suggest to Apollo, who's watching his ticketing system create new forms of economics he never intended. But then, how would we know who really wants to be there? Apollo asks, genuinely puzzled. The whole point of dynamic pricing is to ensure only the most enthusiastic attend. Behind him, someone has figured out how to game the enthusiasm detector by thinking about their favorite food while purchasing, leading to a sudden proliferation of people approaching the ticket booth while intensely contemplating baklava. At least they're passionate about something, the clerk offers weakly, stamping another ticket for someone who's achieved a discount by thinking about disappointing lentil soup. The drachma crashes overnight relative to the concert ticket, creating the Mediterranean's first recorded currency crisis. Apollo, divine god of music and unintentional father of predatory capitalism, watches his economic experiment with the satisfied smile of someone who has no idea what they've unleashed. Tomorrow we'll implement surge pricing for peak hours, he announces cheerfully. The clerk faints. In the distance, the line continues to grow, now developing its own postal system and what might be the early stages of parliamentary democracy. The grandmother nods approvingly and raises her prices. Opening day arrives with all the graceful chaos of a divine hangover wrapped in a logistical nightmare. You're positioned at the main entrance, watching the sun rise. Apollo automated it last night, too busy with last-minute sound checks to manually drive his chariot. When the first attendees begin flooding in, the Centaur security team, handpicked by Apollo for their noble bearing and natural crowd control abilities, stand at attention, looking magnificent for exactly 12 minutes. Remember, their leader, Chiron's nephew Clopatus, addresses his team with the grave seriousness of someone who's never worked event security. We are the thin horse line between order and chaos, no drinking on duty, professional distance at all times, and absolutely no galloping indoors. That's what got Kevin banned from the Dionysian mysteries. The centaurs nod solemnly, their brass security badges gleaming in the morning light. You notice several of them already eyeing the wine vendors setting up. But surely Apollo screened for alcohol tolerance. Surely. The gates open, and the first wave of ticket holders streams in with the orderly precision of a landslide. The centaurs direct traffic with surprising competence, their height advantage allowing them to spot potential problems, like the group trying to smuggle in an entire roasted ox for personal consumption. Going smoothly, Apollo observes, materializing beside you in full golden performance regalia that's somehow both classical toga and what mortals will eventually call rock star chic. See, I told everyone centaurs were the perfect choice. Noble, dignified, absolutely. Is that one doing a keg stand? You turn to see Brodicles, a younger centaur supposedly checking VIP passes, somehow inverting his entire horse body to drink directly from a ceremonial wine barrel while other centaurs cheer. The barrel, you note with growing alarm, is labeled Dionysus's Special Reserve, not for centaur consumption under any circumstances. Code Nay, Clopatus shouts, the prearranged signal for centaur compromised by alcohol, but half his team is already investigating the source of surprisingly good wine that's mysteriously appearing at every checkpoint. Who brought Dionysian wine to my festival? Apollo demands, his aura flashing between various shades of annoyed gold. Complimentary from your brother, a helpful satyr explains, rolling another barrel past a checkpoint where three centaurs are now playing some form of horseshoes using their actual shoes. He said it would help everyone relax. The situation deteriorates faster than Zeus's marriage vows. Within an hour, the Centaur security force has discovered that their unique physiology, half human tolerance, half horse body mass, creates an interesting sweet spot where they're not quite drunk enough to pass out, but definitely drunk enough to make decisions. I love this job, Gyroscopes the Centaur announces, wearing someone's lyre as a hat while directing traffic with interpretive dance. Everyone gets in. Music is for everyone. That's actually my philosophy, Apollo admits, watching Gyroscopes high five, high hoof everyone passing through. But they're supposed to check tickets first. The meet and greet area, advertised as mingle with minor deities and mythological celebrities, becomes ground zero for the day's most predictable disaster. You arrive to find a surprisingly orderly line of mortals waiting to meet various divine celebrities, including the Sphinx, who's charging extra for answers to riddles, a bored looking Narcissus who brought his own reflecting pool, and why? Apollo says very slowly, is Medusa here? You said mythological celebrities, the event coordinator protests, holding a clipboard that's actively trying to escape. She's very famous, and she promised to wear her special sunglasses. You look at Medusa's special sunglasses, which are essentially two small obsidian discs tied with string, and then at the warning sign someone hastily scrawled, direct eye contact not recommended, management not responsible for sudden statuification. It's going fine, Medusa insists, her voice carrying the forced cheer of someone very aware they're a liability. I've only petrified two people, and they were asking for it. Who requests a staring contest at a meet and greet? Those are statue street performers, the coordinator whispers hopefully, but the growing collection of terrified looking statues suggests otherwise. One appears to be frozen mid selfie, creating the ancient world's first photobomb tragedy. Meanwhile, the centaur situation reaches new heights of professional incompetence. Brodicles has appointed himself Vibe Security, which seems to involve galloping through crowds, shouting, "Good vibes only," while occasionally tackling anyone who looks insufficiently festive. Three centaurs have started a betting pool on which acts will run longest, using a complex system involving hoof prints and stolen merchandise. Is that centaur? Is he charging people for high fives? You ask, watching Clipclopidus monetize basic social interaction. Supply and demand, he slurs, nearly missing a high five and charging anyway. My hooves are collector's items. On Apollo's eye twitches in a pattern that spells out, "Help me," in ancient Sumerian. The mainstream historical record notes a curious increase in statue production during this period, though archaeologists attribute it to artistic renaissance rather than Medusa's discount meet and greet rates. The situation climaxes when someone accidentally serves the centaurs ambrosia infused wine, a drink so potent it's usually reserved for gods and their therapists. The entire security force achieves what can only be described as enlightenment by way of complete inebriation. I can see through time, announces Trotsky the centaur, staring at his own hooves. All music is one music. The beat drops eternal. Someone get them hay, Apollo commands desperately, or water, or a philosopher to talk them down from whatever plane of existence they're on. Actually, Stage pipes up helpfully, its voice carrying across the venue. The centaur's current state could be considered a form of performance art. Their chaotic movement patterns are creating interesting acoustic shadows. Not now. Stage, Apollo shouts, then turns to address the growing crowd of amused onlookers. Everything is under control. Please enjoy the festival. Ignore the enlightened horsemen and the statue garden that used to be the VIP section. In the distance, Medusa can be heard arguing that her meet and greet is going great and that statue quality memories wasn't supposed to be literal. A centaur gallops past, wearing what appears to be everyone's tickets as a festive garland. The crowd, mainly mortal and used to divine dysfunction, shrugs collectively and heads for the wine stands. Just another day at Apollo Fest, where the security is drunk, the celebrities are lethal, and the tickets are now decorative. You make a mental note to suggest regular mortal security next time, assuming there is a next time, and Apollo doesn't just turn the whole venue into a very musical memorial to his own hubris. The anticipation for Orpheus's performance has reached levels typically reserved for solar eclipses and Zeus's paternity revelations. You're standing in the wings with Apollo, who spent the last hour giving Orpheus increasingly specific instructions about keeping it chill and maybe not playing the songs that literally move heaven and earth. Orpheus, for his part, looks like someone who's been asked to whisper at his own birthday party. Remember, Apollo says for the 15th time, adjusting Orpheus's laurel crown with the fussiness of a divine stage parent. We're going for emotionally moving, not geologically moving. The insurance doesn't cover tectonic shifts. I understand, Orpheus replies with the patience of someone who's had this conversation before. No mountain moving, no river reversal, definitely no accidentally charming souls out of the underworld. That's very specific. You observe. I have a tendency, Orpheus admits, then glances at his lyre like it's a loaded weapon, which technically it is. Sometimes I get carried away and the music just happens. Stage creaks excitedly. Oh, I've been preparing specialized acoustic configurations for your performance. I've reinforced my foundations and added extra metaphysical support beams. That's concerning, Apollo mutters, but the crowd is already chanting Orpheus's name with the kind of fervor usually associated with free bread distribution or public executions. Orpheus walks onto stage, and the crowd falls silent so fast it creates a small vacuum that sucks in 3 seagulls and a confused merchant's hat. He stands there, beautiful, in that tragic way that makes poets weep and sculptors throw away their chisels in despair, holding his lyre like it contains all the sadness in the world, which, given his history, it probably does. Good evening, Orpheus says softly, and somehow everyone hears him perfectly, including a deaf farmer in the back who immediately starts crying. I'd like to dedicate this first song to anyone who's ever loved and lost. So, everyone then, someone in the crowd whispers, Already reaching for their emergency handkerchief, Orpheus begins to play, and reality immediately starts having opinions about it. The first note hangs in the air like a golden thread, visible to everyone, connecting hearts to memories they thought they'd buried. The second note makes the ocean pause mid-wave, creating a temporary aquatic sculpture garden that Poseidon will later claim was intentional. By the first verse, things are getting concerning. The ground beneath the venue starts to resonate, not quite shaking, but definitely humming along. Small pebbles begin arranging themselves into heartbreaking poetry. A nearby mountain leans in to listen better, causing several shepherds to file formal complaints with the Geological Committee. Is it supposed to do that? You ask Apollo, pointing at the flock of birds that have started flying in formation, spelling out the lyrics in the sky. No, Apollo says weakly. He promised no special effects. This isn't effects, Orpheus calls out between verses, his fingers moving across the lyre strings like water over stones. This is just how music works when you really mean it. The emotional intensity escalates. Grown warriors are openly weeping, creating small rivers of tears that somehow harmonize with the melody. The Centaur security team, still drunk but now also emotionally devastated, are group hugging and declaring their love for everyone. Even the statues from Medusa's meet and greet appear to be crying, which raises several questions about the nature of petrification. Then Orpheus hits the bridge of the song, a melody so pure and devastating that it apparently has opinions about local geography. The mountain that was leaning in to listen takes this as an invitation to relocate entirely, sliding 300 feet closer with the grinding sound of a continental drift having a moment. Orpheus, Apollo shouts. Mountain, moving mountain. Sorry, Orpheus calls back, but he's lost in the music now, his eyes closed, fingers flying. Almost done. The song builds to its climax, and that's when the real problems start. The harmonics awaken something deep underground, titans who've been napping since the war, disturbed by what they later describe as unconscionably beautiful noise pollution. The ground cracks, not in anger, but in sympathy with the music's emotional depth. Why is the underworld answering? Hades' voice booms from somewhere below. I specifically put up do not disturb signs. It's just really good music. Orpheus protests, even as ghostly figures start rising from the cracks, drawn by melodies that transcend the boundaries between life and death. I can't help it if the dead have good taste. The situation reaches peak chaos when Orpheus's deceased wife, Eurydice, partially materializes in the VIP section, looking translucent and annoyed. Really? She says. This again? I'm trying to enjoy being dead in peace, and you're up here literally moving mountains with our breakup songs? The crowd doesn't know whether to applaud or run. Several choose both, creating the world's first standing ovation evacuation. The mountain finally settles in its new position, sheepishly crushing only a small merchant stall, whose owner later claims the insurance money for act of God via divine musical negligence. Apollo rushes on stage as Orpheus finishes, the last note hanging in the air like a beautiful threat. The audience erupts in applause that sounds like emotional catharsis mixed with mild terror. Three titans poke their heads above ground, look around, and decide whatever's happening up here is too much drama even for them. That was Apollo starts, then stops, searching for words that adequately capture beautiful but legally actionable. We're going to need to discuss your definition of keeping it chill. Did I move multiple mountains? Orpheus asks hopefully. Because technically, you only said not to move mountains, plural. That was just one mountain. Stage pipes up supportively. The harmonic resonance was extraordinary. I've never felt so structurally challenged, yet emotionally fulfilled. The fringe historical theory that several Mediterranean mountain ranges achieved their current positions due to musical performances is generally dismissed, though it would explain why so many peaks seem to lean toward ancient amphitheater sites. The mainstream record simply notes unusual geological activity during this period, carefully avoiding the phrase concert involved continental drift. As the crowd files out for intermission, discussing whether they've just witnessed the greatest performance ever or a natural disaster with a melody, you help Apollo calculate the damage. One moved mountain, 17 awakened titans, 16 went back to sleep, approximately 300 ghost sightings, and one very annoyed ex wife haunting the merchandise tent. Next time, Apollo mutters, we're limiting him to instrumentals. In the distance, the mountain settles into its new home with a satisfied rumble that sounds suspiciously like applause. The Seder drum circle was supposed to be the chill ambient interlude between acts, a chance for the audience to recover from Orpheus's mountain-moving performance and prepare for whatever chaos the evening lineup would bring. You're watching Pan arrange his drummers in what he calls a sacred geometric pattern, but looks more like a drunk constellation when the first warning sign appears. The drums themselves seem unusually excited. These aren't your regular drums, Pan explains proudly to Apollo, who's still filling out paperwork for the mountain relocation incident. I had Hephaestus make them special, volcanic goat hide stretched over frames of condensed echo. Condensed echo, Apollo repeats slowly, in the tone of someone who's about to add another line item to his insurance claim. Yeah, they don't just make sound, they make sound that remembers other sounds. Very experimental, very artistic. Pan's goat eyes gleam with an enthusiasm that's never led anywhere good. Plus, I added my own special touch. Each drum is tuned to a different dimension. You and Apollo exchange glances. Stage creaks nervously. Different dimensions. Apollo manages. Just little pocket dimensions, Pan assures him. Nothing major, maybe some light temporal displacement, a little spatial folding, you know, for texture. The satyrs take their positions, a motley collection of half-goat musicians who've clearly been pre-gaming with whatever Dionysus left lying around. Their lead drummer, Crashicus, counts them in by hitting his dimensional drum 4 times, each beat arriving slightly before he actually strikes it. That's unsettling, you observe, watching cause and effect have a small argument. Art is supposed to challenge, Pan declares, picking up his own drum, which appears to be decorated with runes that spell out warranty void if used for interdimensional purposes. And the drum circle begins innocently enough. If you define innocent as only mildly warping local space time, the rhythm is hypnotic, primal, the kind of beat that makes humans invent dancing and then immediately regret it. The crowd starts swaying, first in unison, then in directions that don't technically exist in three-dimensional space. Is it getting warmer? Someone in the audience asks, not realizing they're experiencing the heat death of a tiny universe that's being born and dying with each drum beat. By the third minute, things escalate. The drumming intensifies, and the air above the circle starts to shimmer like a migraine made of possibilities. You watch, fascinated and terrified, as colors that definitely weren't in the visible spectrum start leaking through, painting the evening sky in shades of ultra purple and infra yellow. Pan! Apollo shouts over the rhythm that's now making everyone's heartbeats sync up whether they want to or not. What exactly is happening? Music, Pan shouts back, completely unhelpfully. Pure, dimensional music. Watch this. He strikes his master drum with both hands, and reality essentially throws up its hands and takes a coffee break. Where the center of the drum circle was, there's now a slowly spinning portal about the size of a dinner plate, through which you can see what appears to be another version of the festival where everyone is slightly more purple and walking backwards. Is that supposed to happen? Apollo demands. Define supposed to, Pan replies philosophically, adding a complex rhythm that makes the portal hiccup and briefly show what might be the festival from last week that hasn't happened yet. The audience's reaction is mixed. Some are fleeing, which is sensible. Others are taking notes, which is ambitious. A few philosophers in the crowd are having the time of their lives, shouting things like, I knew reality was negotiable, and take that, Parmenides. The satyrs, meanwhile, are really getting into it. Crasicus is drumming so hard, his past and future selves start appearing around him, creating a temporal percussion section. Another satyr discovers that if he hits his drum at exactly the wrong angle, it makes a sound that colors can hear, causing a synesthetic breakdown that has the local artists weeping with joy and confusion. Should we stop them? You ask Apollo, noticing that some audience members have started speaking backwards without realizing it. I don't know how, Apollo admits. The music has achieved some kind of dimensional resonance. If we stop it suddenly, he's interrupted by a voice from the portal, which has grown to window size and is now showing what appears to be an alternate universe where togas are considered offensive and everyone wears elaborate hats. Excuse me, the other dimensional Apollo shouts through the portal, wearing what can only be described as a hat made of crystallized music. Your drum circle is leaking into our poetry slam. Could you keep it down? Sorry, Earth Apollo shouts back. Interdimensional drum accident. Again? Hat Apollo seems annoyed. This is the third time this epic. The drumming reaches a crescendo that exists in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Several audience members report seeing their own births, deaths, and that embarrassing thing they did at their cousin's wedding all at once. The portal spins faster, showing glimpses of realities where music is illegal, where everything is music, and one disturbing dimension where Apollo is a accountant named Derek. Then, just as it seems like the fabric of reality might unravel entirely, Pan gives a final theatrical flourish and stops. The other satyrs follow suit. The portals snap shut with a sound like reality clearing its throat, and everything returns to normal, except for the audience members who are still speaking backwards, and the small patch of ground that's aged 10,000 years, and Stage, who's now existentially convinced it exists in multiple dimensions and won't stop talking about its other selves. That was amazing, Pan declares, not noticing or not caring that several people in the crowd are comparing notes to make sure they're in the right dimension. We should do this every night. Absolutely not, Apollo says firmly, then pauses. Wait, why do I have memories of being an accountant? The fringe historical theory that ancient Greek philosophy was inspired by accidental exposure to dimensional rifts is generally dismissed by mainstream historians, who prefer to credit pure intellectual achievement rather than that one time Pan's drum circle showed everyone alternate realities where mathematics was edible. As the audience slowly recovers, with some people still trying to walk in directions that no longer exist, you help Apollo add yet another addendum to his growing list of things to never allow at a festival again. At the top, underlined the 3 times, drums that remember the future. In the distance, you can hear Dionysus laughing and taking notes for his next event. Hera arrives at the festival wearing the disguise of a middle-aged health inspector named Hygienia, complete with a clipboard that radiates disapproval and sandals that somehow manage to sound judgmental with every step. You spot her immediately because divine disguises are only effective on mortals, and also because she's the only health inspector in history whose clipboard is made of solidified marital resentment. Routine inspection, she announces to Apollo, who's still trying to help audience members remember which dimension they're supposed to be in. I received several complaints about unsafe divine practices and criminally negligent use of ambrosial substances. We don't even have a health department, Apollo points out, squinting at her definitely fake badge that reads Olympian Bureau of Probably Revenge. We do now, Hera says sweetly, the kind of sweet that makes smart people start checking their insurance policies. Shall we begin with the food vendors? I'm particularly interested in your ambrosia licensing. You follow the divine inspection party as Hera begins her methodical sabotage disguised as safety concerns. At the first ambrosia stand, run by a nervous minor deity of snacks, she makes a big show of examining the golden liquid. This ambrosia is stored at improper temperatures, she declares. Despite ambrosia existing outside the concept of temperature, it could cause immortality in mortals. Shut it down. But that's what ambrosia does, the vendor protests weakly. Exactly, completely unsafe. Hera makes dramatic marks on her clipboard. Next. Apollo trails behind, attempting damage control, while Hera finds increasingly creative violations. The nectar fountain is too nectary. The honey cakes are suspiciously hexagonal, and the wine has incorrect levels of divinity, despite being blessed by Dionysus himself, who's passed out nearby and occasionally mumbling about interdimensional drum circles. This is about the Zeus thing, isn't it? Apollo finally asks, as Hera condemns a perfectly innocent fruit stand for excessive proximity to grapes. I have no idea what you mean, Hera says primly, then pulls out what appears to be a jar full of very angry insects. Oh my, what's this? Plague cicadas in the olive oil. How shocking, how completely unexpected, and definitely not planted by me. She accidentally drops the jar, releasing a swarm of the most tone deaf cicadas in creation. These aren't just any cicadas, these are Hera's special breed, genetically modified through divine spite to sing at exactly the wrong frequency to ruin any musical performance. Their chittering creates a sound like nails on a chalkboard having an argument with a rusty gate. What is that noise? Stage cries out in acoustic agony. It's like anti music. It hurts my grain. The cicadas spread throughout the venue with the efficiency of a divine punishment, settling on every available surface and beginning their offensive symphony. They seem particularly attracted to tuned instruments, crawling inside lutes and lyres to create maximum discord. One enterprising cicada discovers the dimensional drums from earlier and starts playing them, opening tiny portals to universes where music was never invented and everyone communicates through interpretive mime. This is a serious infestation, Hera observes with fake concern, making more notes. I'll have to quarantine the entire venue. No more performances until this is resolved. Could take. Oh, forever? Apollo's aura flashes through several colors not found in nature before settling on incandescent fury with hints of despair. The mainstream historical record notes a mysterious plague of noisy insects during this period, though it attributes them to unusual weather patterns rather than divine stepmother with a grudge and access to genetically modified insects. You can't do this, Apollo protests, trying to catch one of the cicadas, which phases through his hand while somehow singing even more off key. The festival must go on. Must it, though? Hera asks innocently. Because according to my very official inspection, you're also in violation of noise ordinances that I just invented, spatial regulations that didn't exist until I thought of them. And you're definitely breaking the Don't Anger Hera statute of my own personal law code. Velo, the situation deteriorates as the cicadas discover they can harmonize badly with each other, creating what can only be described as a wall of wrong sound. Audience members are covering their ears, musicians are weeping over their corrupted instruments, and somewhere, Euterpe, the muse of music, is having a breakdown that will later inspire the invention of musical criticism. Fine, Apollo explodes, literally, sending small sunbursts across the venue that the cicadas somehow dodge. What do you want, stepmother? Want me? Hera touches her chest in mock surprise, accidentally releasing more cicadas from her sleeves. I simply want this festival to meet proper safety standards. Also, I want Zeus to sleep on the metaphorical couch for the next millennium, but that's unrelated to my very professional inspection. You watch Apollo's face cycle through the stages of grief, get stuck on bargaining, then loop back to anger. The cicadas, meanwhile, have discovered the wine supplies and are now drunk and tone deaf, a combination that creates sounds that make even the gods wince. If I apologize for whatever Zeus did this time, Apollo tries. You mean this hour? Hera sniffs. No, but I might consider lifting the infestation if you publicly announce that this festival is a disaster and that my upcoming Herapalooza, a festival of fidelity, will be far superior. You're planning a competing festival? Planning, dear boy. I've already booked Orpheus for an exclusive contract. He'll be singing only heartbreak songs about unfaithful husbands, very specific unfaithful husbands, with names and detailed descriptions of their indiscretions. The cicada's crescendo in what might be approval or just random noise, it's impossible to tell. Several have formed a tiny chorus line on stage, who's now having an existential crisis about whether bad music still counts as music. This is extortion, Apollo points out. This is family, Hera corrects. Now, are you going to make that announcement, or should I release the backup plague? I have locusts that only eat lyre strings and moths that turn sheet music into divorce papers. Apollo looks at his festival, his beautiful, chaotic, interdimensional disaster of a festival, now overrun with vindictive insects and divine family drama. In the distance, a lone cicada has somehow achieved a note so wrong it's circled back around to being avant-garde, attracting a small following of experimental music enthusiasts. I need a moment, Apollo says weakly. Take all of the time you need. Hera smiles. The cicadas are booked through eternity. Apollo's meltdown begins quietly, which is how you know it's going to be catastrophic. He's standing in the center of his ruined festival, surrounded by tone-deaf cicadas, interdimensional residue, a mountain that's definitely not where it started, and the general chaos that comes from mixing divine ambition with poor planning. His perfect golden aura starts flickering like a candle in a tornado. I just wanted, he says softly, his voice carrying the weight of every failed artistic endeavor since the dawn of time, to throw one perfect festival, one perfect festival. It's not that bad. You try to comfort him, immediately regretting it as a cicada lands on your head and starts singing what might be either a funeral dirge or its attempt at pop music. Not that bad? Apollo's eye twitches. Not that bad? Orpheus moved a mountain. The satyrs opened portals to dimensions where I'm an accountant. My security team is drunk on centaur strength wine. Medusa turned half the VIP section into a statue garden, and now my stepmother has released a plague of insects that make Pandora's box look like a minor inconvenience. The temperature around Apollo starts rising, first uncomfortably warm, then maybe we should step back, then, oh no, he's going solar. Apollo. Stage creaks nervously, its wood beginning to smoke. Perhaps we should discuss this calmly. Calmly? Apollo's voice cracks like a solar flare. I'll show you calm. What follows is the kind of divine tantrum that cartographers will be dealing with for centuries. Apollo's fury manifests as pure heat and light, radiating outward in waves that turn sand to glass, evaporate small bodies of water, and give everyone within a 5-mile radius an absolutely savage tan that will later become fashionable in certain Mediterranean circles. I am the god of music, Apollo roars, his form now less handsome deity and more localized sun having an emotional breakdown. I invented the lyre. I taught humanity to sing, and this is the thanks I get? Cicadas? Each word is punctuated by another burst of divine heat. The area around him begins to desiccate, moisture fleeing like sensible people from a family dinner where someone just mentioned politics. What was once lush coastal vegetation withers and dies, creating an expanding circle of divine devastation. Maybe take some deep breaths, Dionysus suggests from a safe distance, though he's too drunk to realize his wine is literally boiling in its skin. Deep breaths? Apollo laughs, and it's the kind of laugh that makes nearby birds spontaneously migrate. I'll show you deep breaths. He inhales massively, drawing in air with such force that it creates a temporary low pressure system. When he exhales, it's pure solar wind, carrying enough heat to instantly create what will later be known as the Desert of Divine Disappointment, though historians will just call it that unusually arid patch near Corinth. The cicadas, apparently immune to divine tantrums through sheer spiteful engineering, continue their awful symphony. This only makes Apollo angrier. His radiation intensifies, creating thermal updrafts that would make meteorologists weep with confusion. Clouds form and instantly evaporate. The sea retreats a few feet out of sheer self preservation. Everything I touch turns to chaos, Apollo continues, now levitating slightly because the ground beneath him has turned to glass and can't support divine density. Maybe Artemis was right. Maybe I should just stick to driving the sun and writing depressing poetry about laurel trees. The poetry wasn't that depressing, you shout from behind a rapidly carbonizing rock, though you're pretty sure the one about Daphne's leaf texture went on for 47 stanzas too long. Apollo's tantrum reaches its peak when he decides to rage quit his own festival in the most dramatic way possible. He shoots straight up into the air, leaving a Apollo-shaped hole in the atmosphere, and begins sulking at cosmic altitudes. The sun, confused by its driver's emotional state, starts moving erratically across the sky, creating the world's first and most inconvenient strobe light effect. Down below, the festival grounds look like someone decided to combine a beach party with an apocalypse. 3 new deserts radiate outward from where Apollo had his moment, each one somehow angrier than the last. The sand has been fused into glass in some places, creating natural mirrors that reflect the cosmic sulk happening overhead. Well, Hermes observes, having just arrived to witness the aftermath, this is going about as well as expected. Is he coming back? A brave mortal asks, still partially hidden behind what used to be a refreshment stand, but is now an interesting glass sculpture. Oh, he'll be back, Hera says, still in her health inspector disguise, but no longer bothering to hide her satisfaction. He just needs to orbit a few times and write some sad songs. I give it 3 hours before he comes down and apologizes to everyone individually through interpretive dance. The fringe historical theory that several Mediterranean deserts were created by divine temper tantrums is generally dismissed, though it would explain why some arid regions have unusually high amounts of fused glass and residual emotional energy. The mainstream record simply notes unusual weather patterns and sudden regional climate change, carefully avoiding phrases like God induced desertification. Then stage, now slightly charred but still functional, pipes up. Should I prepare an apology ballad arrangement? I've been composing something in B flat minor that really captures the essence of I'm sorry I turned your homeland into a desert. That might help. You agree. Brushing glass dust off your toga and wondering if divine festival insurance covers acts of God having an actual breakdown. Above, Apollo continues his celestial sulk, occasionally sending down rays of, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed, sunshine that somehow makes everyone feel personally responsible for the festival's failure. The cicadas, victorious, organize themselves into a tiny orchestra and begin playing what sounds like a sarcastic victory march. Next time, Dionysus mumbles, still drunk but philosophical, we should just stick to wine and dancing, less ambitious, fewer deserts. And in the distance, you can see merchants already setting up I Survived Apollo Fest merchandise stands. Because if there's one thing mortals understand, it's how to monetize disaster. The Emergency Divine Council convenes in what's left of the VIP tent, which is now more of a VIP concept, since half of it exists in another dimension and the other half is made of fused sand. Zeus arrives first, looking amused in that way that means someone else is in trouble for once. Athena materializes with 17 different damage assessment scrolls. Poseidon brings a tidal wave of complaints about his dolphins getting performance anxiety from the cicadas. So, Zeus begins, barely suppressing divine laughter. Who wants to explain why there are 3 new deserts, a temporally displaced mountain, and, what's this report? A statistically improbable number of statues in my name. Technically, Hermes offers helpfully, they're in Medusa's name. Apollo just provided the venue. And the interdimensional portals? Zeus continues, reading from Athena's increasingly frantic documentation. Apparently, we have 17 noise complaints from parallel universes. Do you know how much paperwork that is? They all use different filing systems. You're watching from behind an overturned ambrosia barrel as the gods play the blame game with Olympic level skill. Dionysus is too drunk to defend himself coherently, just occasionally mumbling about artistic expression and dimensional drum circles are the future. Hera maintains her health inspector disguise with stunning commitment, pretending to take notes about post-disaster contamination protocols. The real issue, Athena interjects, spreading out what appears to be a map of reality with several new holes in it, is the temporal paradoxes. We have audience members who aged backwards, 3 people who now exist in duplicate, and 1 philosopher who claims he's his own grandfather. The fates are furious. They've had to completely reweave at least 47 life threads. Don't forget the economic impact. Hermes adds, the drachma is in free fall against the concert ticket. 3 city-states have declared bankruptcy, and someone needs to explain to the Spartans that they didn't actually lose a war. They just misunderstood a very badly translated concert flyer. Apollo finally descends from his sulk cloud, looking like a golden retriever who knows it's eaten the entire feast but isn't quite sorry enough to stop. His usually perfect hair is singed at the edges, and he's carrying what appears to be an apology song written on a cloud. I've had time to reflect, he begins. You turned three coastal regions into permanent beach glass installations. Poseidon interrupts. My sea creatures are filing a class action lawsuit. I was emotional, Apollo protests. Hera sabotaged everything with her cicadas of spite. Alleged cicadas, Hera corrects primly. As a certified health inspector, I merely discovered a pre existing infestation that definitely wasn't planted by anyone seeking petty revenge for their husband's 800th affair. But Zeus coughs uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in the ceiling that isn't there anymore. Regardless, Athena continues, her voice cutting through divine bickering like a well aimed spear. We need solutions. The mortals are starting to ask questions, hard questions, like why is that mountain over there now? And should music be able to do that? I could modify their memories. Minamazani offers from the corner where she's been documenting everything for the official record that definitely won't mention the accountant dimension. Too many witnesses. Athena shakes her head. Half the Mediterranean saw something. We need a better cover story. Volcanic activity? Poseidon suggests. In three different locations simultaneously. Athena raises an eyebrow. Very enthusiastic volcanic activity. What if? Kronos speaks up, and everyone freezes because when the god of time has opinions, linear causality tends to suffer. We just adjust the timeline, make it so the festival technically happened, but also didn't. A sort of temporal compromise. That's not how time works, Athena protests. Says who? Kronos smiles enigmatically. I've been very flexible about these things lately. Did you know next Thursday happened twice last month? No one noticed. The gods exchange nervous glances. Kronos's solutions tend to create more problems than they solve, like that incident where he made everyone experience their birthdays simultaneously just to streamline the celebration process. No, Zeus decides firmly. We're going with the traditional approach, natural disaster, act of gods, plural, very important, and a healthy dose of mysterious ways. Hermes, you'll handle the press. The press won't exist for another 2,000 years, Hermes points out. Then handle the people who shout news in the agora. Same thing. And Apollo, meanwhile, has been unusually quiet, plucking at his lyre in what sounds like the musical equivalent of anxiety. I could perform an apology tour, he offers weakly. Visit each affected area, maybe turn some of the desert glass into memorial art installations. No more performances, several gods shout simultaneously. What about my stage? Stage itself pipes up, having been forgotten in the corner. I've developed 17 new personalities from the dimensional exposure, and frankly, some of them have concerning opinions about architecture. We'll get Hephaestus to look at that. Zeus waves dismissively, then fixes Apollo with his best disappointed father stare. As for you, nephew, you're on sun duty only for the next century. No festivals, no concerts, no open mic nights, nothing. The mortals need time to recover, and frankly, so does reality. But, Apollo starts, but nothing. Zeus's voice thunders. Do you have any idea how much ambrosia I'll have to drink to forget the image of you as an accountant in Universe Beta 7? My therapist is going to need a therapist. As the gods continue debating damage control, you notice small changes starting to take effect. The temporal paradoxes are being quietly resolved by exhausted looking minor deities of paperwork. The new deserts are being officially registered as always having been there. The mountain's new position is being added to maps with notations of cartographer error, definitely not divine tantrum related. And the cicadas? Apollo asks hopefully. Can we at least get rid of those? Hera smiles sweetly. Oh, they're endemic now, permanent residents. Think of them as a reminder of the importance of family harmony. I hate this family, Apollo mutters. That's the spirit, Dionysus cheers, raising a wineskin. To Apollo Fest, the festival that technically happened but officially didn't. May all our disasters be so memorable. The fringe historical theory that ancient damage control involved extensive divine gaslighting is generally dismissed by scholars, who prefer to believe that mortals simply had poor record keeping, rather than accepting that gods literally rewrote reality to avoid insurance claims. As the council disperses, each god heading off to handle their portion of the crisis, Apollo sits alone in the ruins of his vision, playing a sad song on his lyre that makes the remaining cicadas actually harmonize correctly out of sheer pity. Next time, he promises the universe, I'm just sticking to poetry readings. In the distance, the fates exchange knowing looks and begin weaving something that looks suspiciously like concert tickets. The aftermath of Apollo Fest spreads across the ancient world like the universe's most elaborate game of telephone, where each retelling adds new impossibilities until the truth becomes indistinguishable from myth. You're helping with the cleanup efforts, which mostly involves convincing pieces of reality to return to their proper dimensions and assuring traumatized merchants that their memories of backwards talking customers are probably just heat stroke. Apollo, restricted to his solar duties, makes his daily journey across the sky with notable melancholy. The sun's path wobbles occasionally, creating what mortals will later call seasons, but are really just Apollo sighing dramatically while driving. He's taken to playing sad songs during sunset, turning each evening into a golden hour pity party that makes everyone inexplicably nostalgic for concerts they're not supposed to remember. The cicadas, Hera's lasting revenge, establish themselves throughout Greece with the tenacity of a divine grudge. They develop regional variations. Athenian cicadas attempt philosophical discourse. Spartan cicadas organize militant formations. And the ones near Delphi claim to predict the future, but only in frequencies humans can't properly hear. Musicians across the Mediterranean resign themselves to the cicada cadence, incorporating the insect's drone into their compositions rather than fighting it. You know what the funny thing is? Hermes mentions, appearing beside you as you catalog which items belong in this dimension. The festival kind of worked, not how Apollo intended, but look. He gestures across the landscape where, despite everything, changes are taking root. The satyr's interdimensional drum experiment, while officially never happening, has inspired a wave of percussionists exploring theoretical rhythm. The musicians who witnessed Orpheus's performance and retained their sanity speak in hushed tones about the possibility of music that moves more than just hearts. The accidentally created deserts become pilgrimage sites for artists seeking inspiration from Apollo's passion zones, though officials maintain their natural formations. The fused sand creates natural amphitheaters with allegedly perfect acoustics, where performers swear they can sometimes hear stage offering constructive criticism on the wind. History won't remember it correctly. You observe, watching a group of young musicians practice near the beach, unconsciously incorporating elements they learned during the festival that technically didn't happen. History never remembers anything correctly. Hermes shrugs. But music remembers. Every time someone plays a song that makes mountains want to dance, every time dress sound like doors to elsewhere, every time a performance changes someone so fundamentally they need new pronouns for their emotions, that's Apollo Fest. Stage, now permanently installed as a regular amphitheater after extensive therapy from Hephaestus, still occasionally mentions its other dimensional selves. I exist in 17 realities now, it tells performers. In one of them, I'm made entirely of crystallized sound. In another, I'm married to a lighthouse, very avant garde. The stone victims of Medusa's meet and greet are quietly relocated to various gardens as classical sculptures of unknown origin. Art historians will spend centuries debating why so many ancient statues appear to be frozen mid selfie, creating entire academic careers around theories of pre photographic narcissism in marble. And Orpheus retires from public performance, claiming he needs to work on some new material that won't rearrange geography. He spends his days teaching students about responsible musical power, a course that won't officially exist, but will somehow influence every major musician for the next 1,000 years. The temporal paradoxes mostly sort themselves out, though a few persistent glitches remain. There's a small village where everyone ages backwards during festivals, a grove where music plays before instruments create it, and one very confused philosopher who maintains simultaneous existence in 3 different decades, but has adapted by starting history's first temporal consulting firm. I've been thinking, Apollo calls down from his chariot during a particularly moody sunset, the sky painted in shades of divine regret. Maybe the festival succeeded in ways I didn't intend. Look at all the music that came from it. Strange music, impossible music, music that shouldn't exist but does. Like those Theban teenagers who started that thing where they yell rhythmically about their feelings, you suggest. Slam poetry. Apollo nods, a small smile breaking through his celestial sulk. Calliope hates that I'm taking credit for her accident. But yes, and those merchants who started making mechanical drums that play themselves, and that cult in Crete that claims they can summon rain through interpretive dance, completely wrong, but their enthusiasm is admirable. The economic crater left by the festival fills slowly with new opportunities. I survived Apollo Fest becomes a phrase indicating someone who's experienced the impossible and live to be confused about it. The merchandise, officially bootleg since the festival never happened, becomes the ancient world's first collectible memorabilia. A simple clay tablet claiming to be from the event sells for enough to buy a small farm. We're planning Harapalooza for next year, Hera announces during a family dinner. Her health inspector persona finally retired. A celebration of fidelity, commitment, and definitely not revenge. I'm thinking three stages, labeled denial, anger, and acceptance. No music that rearranges reality? Zeus asks hopefully. Oh no, Hera smiles. Just music that rearranges marriages, much more targeted. As time flows forward, mostly linearly thanks to Kronos' patch job, Apollo Fest becomes legend, then myth, then a story drunk people tell to explain why certain places have strange acoustics. The truth fragments and scatters like light through a prism, each piece reflecting a different, impossible moment. But late at night, when the wind is just right and the cicadas achieve accidental harmony, you can still hear it, the echo of a festival that shook the foundations of reality, moved mountains with melody, and proved that sometimes the best art comes from divine disaster. Apollo, forever changed by his spectacular failure, continues his daily journey with a new understanding. The sun's light carries subtle rhythms now, imperceptible to most, but felt by musicians who understand that some frequencies exist between what is and what could be. Would you do it again? You ask him one evening as he prepares for another sunset symphony. Apollo considers this, his fingers finding familiar chords on his lyre. In a heartbeat, he admits, but maybe with better security, and definitely no centaurs. The music swells as the sun sets, painting the sky in impossible colors that remind some of interdimensional portals, others of divine tantrums, and a lucky few of the night music literally moved the world. In the distance, Orpheus's relocated mountain stands as a monument to the power of art to change everything, even geography. The festival may be over, the evidence hidden or transformed, the memories officially discouraged. But somewhere in an alternate dimension, an accountant named Derek looks at spreadsheets and dreams of golden stages and songs that matter enough to remake the world. Wind down as our tale of divine ambition and musical chaos gently fades like the last note of Apollo's lyre. You find yourself drifting back from that ancient beach where gods threw tantrums and mountains danced to mortal songs. The warm Mediterranean breeze becomes the soft whisper of your own breath, steady and calm. Those cosmic drums that opened doorways between worlds now slow to match your heartbeat, each pulse a gentle reminder that you're here, safe in your own dimension, where music can't relocate geography and security guards probably aren't centaurs. Feel the weight of your body settling deeper into comfort, like sand accepting the shape of divine footprints before the tide smooths everything back to peaceful simplicity. The excited chatter of festival crowds transforms into the quiet hum of your own space, perhaps a fan turning lazily, perhaps the distant murmur of a world that asks nothing of you except rest. Let Apollo's sun complete its journey across your inner sky, painting your thoughts in soft golds and warm ambers before giving way to starlight. The cicada's chaotic symphony fades to cricket songs, then to silence, then to that perfect quiet where sleep lives. You're drifting now, floating like those dolphins in Poseidon's impossible pools, except your water is made of dreams, and every stroke takes you deeper into peaceful darkness. No tickets required for this journey, no divine family drama awaiting, just you and the gentle current pulling you toward morning. Rest now, dear dreamer. Let the festival of your day close its cosmic doors. The mountains will still be where you left them tomorrow, and that's probably for the best. Sweet dreams, and may your sleep be filled with only the kindest of impossible music.